All right. Well, welcome everybody. And I want to first say thank you so much to Dion and the AAISP for inviting me to speak with the audience of the AAISP. We had a great meeting last week with some speakers on AI and sales, and I thought that was very interesting. Thank you also, everyone, for dealing with the reschedule. We had some technical issues last week and making sure that we were able to get everyone here and present this, kind of hopefully fun content to everyone. So thanks for dealing with the reschedule. Without further ado, what I want to talk about a little bit, and the topic of this webinar was breaking the mold in marketing and sales. And what I really meant was there are certain things that everyone feels like they should do. And should is really relative, and that's what we want to talk about today. So there are some things that you really should do because you really should do them, and I call them the sacred cows. But I also want to talk about the things that I called wild cards, which might or might not work for you. Like they are things that are very wildly differing for different companies. And so I just want you to take those with a grain of salt. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about like, hey, what it means to test these things, how you do it, how you pitch it to your boss to get them to give you money for those tests. And then importantly, how the innovation that's going on in sales right now actually will work with you, not against you. So without further ado, there are a number of sacred cows that I think are things that absolutely everyone should be doing no matter what. Knowing your customers, executing against sales leads, doing the basics of SEO, which has had a lot of misnomers over the years, but I'm going to talk about things that are true and good in content. Search engine marketing, paid search is not going away anytime soon, still the biggest channel for many, many companies. Email, despite rumors, is not dead. And then one that's really actually having a renaissance is trade publications, and they've been around for a bazillion years. So knowing your customers. So according to the Content Marketing Institute, only 42% of marketers talk to customers. That is a kind of a pitiful number, because if you compare, 65% of people use keyword research and 75% do website research. So if you're going to research your customers, talk to some of them. That really never gets old. I'll illustrate that with a little story. I worked with a client a couple years back in the hardware space, industrial hardware, and they actually called their product one thing. And when I actually went and talked to customers and talked to them about this product and how they used it and whatnot, they used a totally different word. Guess which one of these was the one that the customer used? So this is Google Trends. For those of you who aren't familiar with Google Trends, it's incredibly helpful. It gives you relative search volume of different search terms. And the line in the blue was actually the type of phrase that customer used to describe this particular product. And the red line is the one that the company used. So if you are not actually talking to your customers and you're making assumptions based on what you think you know about your industry or what the industry jargon is, this is why there's no excuse for not talking to your customers. This is to talk about sales execution and making sure that things are just actually happening all the time. Very close friend, John DeBrinket, who maybe he's on the phone today, who knows. I had lunch with him last week, and he was just banging on the table, literally saying, all of the marketing efforts in the world is not going to do any good if there is not actual execution against the leads. And in this case, this big bold number 18 is the number of attempts needed to reach an average sales prospect. And I bet you can look at your own teams and say, we know we're not doing 18. We know it doesn't have to be 18 in a row, guys, and this is where marketing's nurture comes in and whatnot. But it definitely, we have to stay on top of executing against those leads and not just letting them go down the drain. Other statistics that are relevant here, only 7% of sales reps attempted to reach a lead within 5 minutes. We actually did a test on that some years back in my life and definitely found that 5-minute number is the magic number. And Dion is here. I'm sure she would vouch for the same. I'm sure she tells that to her clients every day.
Yes, I do.
And
Amen.
And despite both of those statistics, another research study showed that 37% of reps say that reaching someone was their biggest challenge. And so put all that together, and we just know that we have to keep executing, and we will solve that reaching clients challenge. Okay. We sometimes hear that SEO is dead. Well, that is a little bit of a misnomer. So SEO used to have a lot of connotations related to sort of black hat techniques, sort of, on-page SEO. How do you do all of the tags and all of that stuff? And all of that stuff is, largely true today, although the black hat stuff is largely gone. But producing quality content that answers the questions of your prospects has not. This is a chart that shows the search engine results page for people who have the featured snippet, and you'll know what that is. If you don't, you'll see a picture in a second. People who clicked on the actual call to action for these pages, whether they had the featured snippet or not. And you can see the featured snippet in the answer box, they call it here in this chart, is this orange line. So it's a huge order of magnitude difference than if it's not just in a regular organic search results. Let me illustrate that with a real life true story. This is actually Orange Marketing's website traffic, and this big spike, happy spike up here, that was really fun, and we initially were not sure what happened, but I can tell you what happened. We actually had the feature box for a minute related to workflows versus sequences, but if you go backwards, you'll see that that fell off quickly. That's because we're in a horse race with HubSpot themselves. So HubSpot decided to take this back from us. So these, the SEO of like getting these snippets can have a really dramatic effect on your traffic, but you have to constantly keep on top of it because it's always going to be a horse race from somebody who's trying to take it back from you. Again, like you can't afford to not be in paid search, right? So search engine marketing is not going away. The total distribution of search across the United States, it's all Google. If you're not on Google AdWords, now just called Google Ads, like you kind of just have to play the game. I know it's expensive. I know that it can be incredibly expensive if you make mistakes. I had a client a few years back whose name, they were a construction software company, and they had the same name in their name as a large car manufacturer, and they had forgotten to use keyword negatives for that car manufacturer. So that was a really expensive search engine marketing mistake. But as long as you have, if you can in-source it so that people who really understand your business are really working on those keywords and they know they're relevant to your business, that's always best in my personal opinion. Otherwise, find yourself an agency who can really understand your business so you don't have an expensive mistake, but you can't afford not to be here. Email. The report of my death was an exaggeration, and I actually looked this up, and this quote has been misquoted many times, but in the case of email, no matter how you say it, email is not dead. So email is really there's a ton of innovation going on in email. There's a ton of innovation regarding video autoplay in email. There's interaction in email. There's more going on here than in the recent past, and a real renaissance in sales, which we'll talk about in a minute in terms of use of email. But as always, the things that haven't changed are what's true and good about email. So have a clear target. So make it relevant and interesting to that target. So with marketing automation tools these days, there's almost no excuse not to set yourself a really fine segment or to use dynamic personalization to make your emails really relevant to your audience so that you can maintain engagement rates, reduce the attrition of your list, and so forth. But so email is definitely not dead. The other thing that is not dead, which actually just amuses the heck out of me, is if you're in B2B, you absolutely need to consider trade publications. There really is a trade publication for every business. This one struck me as hilarious, but it illustrated my point so incredibly well that this is the Fish Fryers Review. and it is a magazine written for fish fryers written by fish fryers for fish fryers. So if there's a magazine for fish fryers, there is definitely some kind of publication for your industry. And they have many, many, many different options for advertising for you. Some of them are promoted content, some of them are straight email, some of them are straight display. And all of these publications have a variety of policies. Some of their policies can be incredibly advantageous to you. For example, I had a trade publication in HR Tech give me all of the email addresses of anyone who clicked on the link. So it was an incredibly fast and inexpensive way to gain opt-ins into your database that then you could nurture. So the cost per contact was incredibly low. It just that they were very, very high funnel, and then it took a lot of nurturing to make those become real leads. But on the flip side, you might have buyer's guides and that kind of things where they'll give you basically PO ready leads. So definitely check out your trade pubs. So I know I went through this really quickly. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A, and then I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to talk more about these at the end. So I'm going to move on and talk about the wild cards. So I don't really play cards. I'm not a fan of cards at all, actually, but I love slot machines. I kind of feel like some of these, and there are many, many, many more of these, but here are some of the marketing tactics that can either totally pay off, like you can totally hit the jackpot, or they'll just take your money, just like a slot machine. So a great example is, well, let me back up for a second. Before you're doing any of these things, you really need to be making sure that you have all of your basics covered. So we just talked about some of the things that I definitely think are basics, but if you're not doing a good job of collecting leads, processing and routing those leads, getting the follow-up on those happening, it is probably not time for you to start delving into all of these experimental things. Like, I think about this as like, if you are not eating and sleeping indoors, you are definitely not ready for self-actualization. So let that just be kind of a word of caution before you try any of these additional tactics. Paid social, it can be an absolutely phenomenal opportunity, both for consumer and B2B, believe it or not. So here's a couple of things to think about when you're considering paid social. You definitely have to pick the right network, and there's a lot more than the big three. There are many, many more, and some of them might be great opportunities for you. I know some companies in B2B who are having great success in Reddit and Quora. So you got to pick the right network. Creative is much more important in social than in other places. It's a totally visual media for the most part. And so you definitely have to be willing to experiment there. At one time in my life, we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in paid social, and we did some creative testing, and it turned out that ads with bicycles, despite the fact that it had absolutely nothing, our product had nothing to do with bicycles, ads with bicycles performed the best. You want to use paid social at the right stage of the buying cycle. So frequently, but not always, and it definitely depends on your business, B2B, B2C, and your product. Top of the funnel, very popular for paid social, but it absolutely can work for conversion. That little speaker on the left there, that's actually a speaker, but I picked a Texas A&M one for my own gratification. I worked with a performance marketing agency called Ad Quadrant here in Orange County. A little shout out to them. They're really fantastic. And they do consumer goods, and they won't sell they won't take a client if their product is not going to sell on social. That's what they do. And so they'll just evaluate it and say, is this something that we can get people to buy right now? So they actually evaluate for the stage. You have to have budget, right? So this is not necessarily a cheap endeavor. So you definitely need to be able to have enough money to experiment. If you have an incredibly skilled team, or you are willing to really scale, you can start really small. But in paid social, you get really a stair step effect of spend. So you can get to where they seem really cheap, and then you say, okay, like put in 10 times as much money into there, and then all of a sudden your cost per lead is going to go way up. So then you have to optimize it again. So you need some money to spend to follow up on this. You need to measure it correctly. So depending on all of those other things I just talked about, you need to measure for a long time, perhaps, if these were top of the funnel. If you are in the middle of the funnel, you might need to have multi-touch attribution measurement. And so for some of you, that's incredibly important, especially those of you with big consumer budgets. Like, you need to know where this fits in your attribution. So you can see there are a lot of variables here to consider. So, you know, fraught with peril is, I guess, what I would always say for things that can either pay off or take your money. I'll say ditto with conversational marketing. So chatbots and chat and conversational marketing are hot, hot, hot right now, and rightly so, right? So everybody has an Alexa or a Google. Oops, my Google actually just spoke back to me just then. Everybody's got a chat bot, but this was just a kind of a funny fail. I thought this was a good one, but I myself have experienced some really terrible fails. So you have to really be thoughtful about creating up your chat or your chat bot. So I'll give you a for example. For example, the chatbot creators make it incredibly easy for you to collect information from a user and then use it in personalization. So I would use, hey, let me have your first name, and you know, so that I can say hi first name, right? Well, if you say, hi, what's your name? And they say, I don't want to give it to you, then your next chat says, hi, I don't want to give it to you. How can I help you today? Imagine if it's not something so polite. That actually doesn't go so super well. And it really kind of can get worse and worse as the whole thing goes along. So just be very thoughtful and test with all things that you could possibly think of that could go wrong if you're going to set up a chat bot. So if you are in the eating and sleeping indoors stage, I absolutely recommend just plain live chat to a avatar and see what kinds of things you get. So then you can figure out what you want to create your chat bot. Okay, so there's also, you know, many other tools. So AI, right? So last week I mentioned that we went to this great AAISP event where there was a topic about AI in sales. This is just the AI in sales tech landscape. So every marketing tech and sales tech and everything tech has its own landscape slide like these days. I can't see the tools, but be cool to see a hand raise of how many of you are actually using any of these tools. We did that in the meeting last week, and there was a lot of interest, but not a lot of people really using it. This is definitely a challenge because what the speakers were referring to and what we know about all AI and machine learning is that garbage in, garbage out. And a lot of these tools rely on your existing data, for example, your existing CRM data, to make recommendations. An example I thought of a few years ago when I was working with a company who was trying to enter a new market. They wanted to use AI tools to just say, here's how we're going to prioritize all of our sales leads. Well, the problem was they were never, ever going to get any of the leads in the market they weren't in because they weren't in the market. There was nothing for the AI to recommend. They couldn't learn, the model couldn't learn from any data because there was no data in the market they were going into. So just, you know, again, you know, be thoughtful here. These companies make it really easy to buy it. John, who I was telling you I had lunch with last week, was telling me about an example where he tried to incorporate one of these tools. It was an absolute epic fail. And it was one of his top fails, he said, was trying to implement an AI tool, and they just gave it up, you know, pretty quickly. I think he's going to try again, but this one is one that I would be pretty cautious with. And then talk about things where you can spend a lot of money, and it could be a big hit or a big miss. This is, of course, a Tesla in space. And if you're Tesla, you 100% have the money to pull off a big moonshot like this. So guerrilla marketing or huge PR tactics 100% could pay off. Like this was, if you did not see this picture, you were under a rock, right? So this definitely got a lot of attention. And so if you have the money, these can definitely pay off, but they can also be big flops. So they can, and when I say big flops, we can talk about like large money flops here, obviously. So, those are some examples and just a few of many kind of new innovations that you see if you are getting a lot of marketing publications in your inbox or in your news feed. You see a lot of these things that people say everyone's doing. So I just want you to take that everyone's doing it with a grain of salt. It really might or might not apply to you. And how do you know if it applies to you or not? Well, you have to test these things. And refer to my Maslow's hierarchy slide. You shouldn't even be testing some of these things unless you have your basics down. But the other reason you shouldn't be testing some of these things is if you remember your high school statistics, you have to have enough data for it to be statistically significant, right? So A/B testing, I swear I have not come across any email article that doesn't say something about A/B testing. I haven't come across any website articles that don't talk about A/B testing. And so our clients talk to us about A/B testing all the time. Now the problem is, most early stage startups, they just plain don't have enough data for it to be anything other than interesting. And they definitely can be interesting, but you can't, this whole p-value thing that you see in this chart, this is literally like the high school math statistics chart about most likely observation. And this idea of statistical significance is, are you actually likely to get that same result again if you test it again? And what people kind of take to the bank, if they have very small numbers of data, they'll do an A/B test with 500 emails, and the open rate overall is 15% anyway. And then the difference between the A and the B is one was 15% and one was 17%. And so they decide, boom, and the tools make it really easy to say, boom, send the rest of it to the 17% one. Well, the problem is that most likely that's not statistically significant, and you might not get the same result. So just keep your high school math in the back of your mind. There's a million tools out there to do your own statistical significance testing. And when you're talking to your leadership, be clear about it, right? Like, hey, this is directionally a test. I think this is really interesting. We have really small numbers here, or whatever it is. Or you can say, we had a 90% statistical significance. Like, this is definitely the test. Whichever it is, both are fine. Just make sure you're declaring that. The other thing that people ask a lot about is, how do I get my boss to buy in to my experiments? I really like to have people declare it as an experiment, right? You can present your boss a range of different options and outcomes, right? So you could say, well, we could do this trade publication, and there is the email newsletter, and it has a range of 100 to 120 leads. Or we could do, from the same publication, the white paper syndication, and it is $7,500, and we're going to expect 500 leads. Put your range of options and outcomes just the same way as you would in your pricing page on your website, right? Probably the boss is going to choose the middle one. Like, I'm saying that from experience, of course, right? So put together the range of the options and the outcomes and put the one that you want to do in the center. Tell them your assumptions. Here's how I came up with this math. And just what you're trying to do is be very open kimono, so people don't think that you have some surreptitious reason for why you want to do this test. So just show them the math, like, here's what I think is going to happen. But then show them the rubric for how you're going to measure that experiment. So if you say, hey, I think this is a top of the funnel activity, so we're going to look at things where we're going to find out how many opens and clicks there are, and we're not going to worry about how many conversions there are until later. Right, so just show them what the rubric of how you're going to measure for success is, and just say, here's what red and yellow and green look like, and explore that with them regularly. So the more you are transparent about what you're experiencing, the more likely that even if you have an epic fail, and if you haven't already, you will, right? You will have epic fail. If as long as you're being transparent about what you're doing, then your chances of getting more experiments go higher. Same with the timeline. Like, never ever set expectations that you're going to know something about the total outcome right away. And especially on things that I talked about in the wildcard section, like paid social, right? Well, you can't scale it very fast. And if you do scale it very fast, you're going to lose a lot of money, and you're going to call it a fail too soon when you, in fact, might have a real success on your hands. So declare what the timeline of success or failure looks like, and it could be a long time. And make sure you explain that ahead of time, and that will buy you the runway that you need to test your idea. And last but not least, it's not just about marketing here, folks, right? Sales without marketing and marketing without sales is worthless. Like, we're together, we're a team. HubSpot calls it smarketing. I don't actually really like that word that much, but one way or the other, resistance is futile, right? So sales and marketing are together now. And if you're not thinking about it that way, like, you got to kind of get in 2019. Some of the trends that we're seeing are, it's much more common for the BDR teams to be owned by marketing these days. We actually did that in my past quite a long time ago, but we were really ahead of the game there. So we had kind of qualification going on in marketing. That's much more common these days, which is great, right? It is the production of early stage leads. There is a real renaissance of email prospecting going on. There are just like a proliferation of tools for email prospecting. Marketers really want to try to resist that, because they go, can spam, the California laws, GDPR, right? Like, don't try to fight it. Like, resistance is futile. Like, get with the program and help your sales team be effective and help them stay compliant. So help them with some different templates. Help them think about new ideas in email that maybe you're seeing successful on the marketing side that they can incorporate into the sales side, like video, right? Probably everybody on the sales teams are talking about one-to-one video. If they're not, they're going to be. So there's just, have this sharing between things that are happening in marketing and things that are happening in sales, but don't try to tell them not to, because they're going to. Same thing with social selling, right? Sales teams are being lectured all day and twice on Sundays, and they really are doing a lot of social selling. Don't tell them what they can't do, because you want them to be doing this. Provide them the ammunition to be effective out there, with some, great content that they can share. Give them some snippets they can try. Help them with the training. If they're not already getting that training, get them some social selling training so they can be more effective. Give them a content inventory of all of the things that you have that they can use. Help them be successful in social selling instead of trying to tell them not to do it. And last but not least, I actually saw a really cool exchange on LinkedIn yesterday about conversational intelligence. And conversational intelligence tools are things like Gong.io, and there are a number of these tools nowadays that actually listen to sales calls and provide, using AI and other methods, great coaching opportunities. So this is, for one, fantastic from a product. This is a product marketer's dream come true, right? So a product marketer can say, here is the message that we want to tell everyone all the time. And the conversational intelligence can tell you that they're doing it or not. But more importantly, it'll tell you, is it working or not, right? So the feedback loop is incredible. But what people were talking about on LinkedIn yesterday was the fact that if you don't know what's going to work and what your overall messaging should be from a marketing standpoint, using these conversational tools to listen or observe, I guess, rather, is better the idea, because you don't have to do side-by-side phone observations like you used to have to back in the day. You can observe a huge number of these sales conversations, and you can see what resonates with your prospective customers. It's an incredible way to build your product marketing. Okay, so I'm over time, And I ran through that incredibly quickly because we had a very short period of time here. Just a simple plug for Orange Marketing. We specialize in sales and marketing growth strategy for B2B SaaS and technology companies. But mostly on this slide, I wanted you to be able to request these slides. There is my email address. You can also get them on our website, or you can tweet us. If you would like to spend more time, or if you would like to share these slides with your team, I am happy to help you facilitate that as well. So please just feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk about any of these in any more depth. And so with that, thank you so very